So the first thing I did for my pre-production was I just did some generic mood boards of images of the game Alien Isolation, but also images of the actual movie Alien. Um, since the movie came out before the game, so it has more of the real alien essence, I guess you could say. Um, and there was a lot of the sort of same vibe of the alien environment, um, which I thought was quite like good for like research wise. So I knew that I was working with simple shapes. Um, at first, I wanted to make a room, which the one I wanted to make was this one in particular with the big round table and chairs with the sort of objects in the middle. But because of the amount of time I had, I opted to just go for a simple hallway because I didn't think I'd have enough time to make detailed meshes like that. Um, but whilst researching the general environments that already exist in Alien, I wanted to steer more in a direction where I would make a hallway that still gives off the Alien Isolation vibe, but it's not just like the generic sort of one with a bunch of cushions on the wall and it looks like all the other sort of alien hallways. But I found this reference image, which I quite liked because it sort of still looks like Alien, but also less scary. Because a lot of alien environments they appear quite scary, so I kind of wanted to challenge myself and make an alien environment that gives a more softer vibe than you're about to die from an alien, essentially. After figuring out what sort of environment I'd like to make, I made a quick little asset list on Excel. I just found a template on there and used it. It's a very scuffed one, but it kind of helped with just seeing it visually on how much I actually needed to do, which obviously by this image wasn't a lot, like modelling wise. But I started off with putting them in, and then how long, and then like as I finished them, I would update it until I got the final version, which is this one. And overall, I think I met the time pretty well on it. This is just for the modeling sense, though. Obviously, the texturing I did end up doing until the very end of the project, but for the modelling wise, I didn't do too bad for time. As for a block out, I did have a block out of my original idea, that being the table and the hallway, but somewhere along the way it corrupted, deleted itself, something like that, and I no longer have it. But I do have screenshots of the block out of the new idea of the smaller hallway, which are these. So with the modelling, I didn't get any like actual raw footage of me modelling everything, but I was able to grab a few screenshots of each individual model. So I'll quickly go over them. So for the generic wall, I started off with just some normal meshes of cubes and a cylinder. And at first I did it quite short, like width wise, and after looking at the reference images a bunch, I realised there was a lot longer, so I extended it as I was editing it, and all of those components there are all separate, and I did different texture sets on them all just so I can differentiate them and it was easier to texture them later on. So it's just two walls, a plane on the back, a cube that was extended and beveled for the pillow, a light which is just a cylinder that is highlighted in yellow, and all the other meshes are just cubes that have been edited and beveled and extruded and whatever else. For the wide wall, it's the same layout except the middle part is different, so I modelled a lamp in a cage, the generator and like the boxes which connect to the generator, and also a vent. And they're all separate objects, and again I did texture sets on all of them too, which really helped again with texturing in Substance Painter. For the hallway, again it was quite a simple shape, so it was just a cube. So I first did the generic shape of the frame, as if it was still like one block, and then I did some multi-cut vertices and of like the shape of the hallway, and then I deleted the faces in the middle, merged everything together and did the usual sort of clean up and everything, and then I beveled the edges, and I then played around with the scaling, because through this time modelling I was making sure that everything was up to scale in the environment, because I wanted to make sure that nothing was too like big or it didn't fit the other meshes in the environment. With the smaller wall, I just put them all into one image of like the process. So I started off with a cube and I scaled it upwards and pushed some of the faces back to do that sort of indent in the middle, and added a separate cube as that sort of sign in the middle, and then I scaled it around in the second the second mesh in the middle, and added some more detail to the bottom part. I had more depth, and then I added a little light on the top too, where the yellow sort of texture set is. With the ceiling, I kind of would have done this a lot differently now looking back, as it did cause a lot of issues with me, and I just realised there's like easier ways of doing it. The way I did it was I took a cube and did a bunch of multi-cuts to make those that sort of like tiley sort of checkers board texture or layout even, and then I grabbed all those faces and extruded them and then beveled them, and yeah, it does look, you know, decent, but it definitely wasn't fun to UV unwrap. And also when it came to texturing them, the ceiling had to have like 4 circles at the same sort of position, and when I tried to do that it wasn't working because all the squares were different scales, and yeah, I couldn't tile it properly. But if I modelled it a lot differently, that would have definitely changed it, so I would have do that differently next time. Okay, with the floors, I went for a very simple sort of shape and style floor, because with the floor from the reference image, it was more so the texture that looked like it brought it together, so that's the sort of thing I did with my floor. So I just got a cube and extruded this face on the side, and I multi-cut a face on the end and extruded that as well. And then after that I texture set the different faces, which also helped visually see how it would look coming together, and if it looked more like the reference image, by doing the blue in the middle, the orange on the end, and then the sort of light grey white on the sides. But yeah, once the texture was put on in the actual environment itself, it definitely came together and it looked more detailed than just the model on its own. Lastly, the door. I did the same thing I did for the hallway frame, but instead of making a frame, I made a door. But I used the same method of making the general structure of the door frame, which is this block out here, which I then extruded the corners in and beveled those corners to make it more rounder. So then I did a face in the middle, and that would act as the sort of main part of the door. And then with a separate mesh, I made the walls that would go next to the door. Which then I did separate meshes of little lines that sort of stick out on the wall, which again I was just following the reference pictures, and doing them all with separate objects definitely helped, and that's definitely one key thing I've learnt during this project, is just to try and keep as many meshes separate as possible, because it does make up for a cleaner mesh at the end. And then I worked on the detail in the middle of the door, and then after that I just did some texture sets on everything, which at the end you could visibly see the finished product already. And then again with the texture sets, it made it a lot easier to texture it all in Painter after finishing the model. I did come into a few errors with this door though as I was modelling it. I had a lot of overlapping vertices, which when it came to unwrapping it made it a lot difficult. But once I found all those vertices, I was able to merge them all together and do the unwrap again, and it all came out smoother in Painter. After doing the unwrapping and making the materials on Painter, the way I export them into Unreal was I imported the meshes in as materials and then hooked them up to the correct components, which at first I did completely wrong, but I managed to fix it with some help from my tutor, and the materials came out a lot more cleaner and smoother on my meshes. I also had some spare time too, so I added some cool features to my environment to bring it to life, such as the steam particle that is coming out of my vent. And the way I did this was I just used the starter content that you get in Unreal, and it's in the particle folder, and I just dragged it in and put it into place, and it really did help bring the immersion into my environment, and just made it more real and added something different to it, so it wasn't just you're walking down a hallway with nothing happening. So I also added some sound, and the way I did this was I imported a MP3 sound file, which I grabbed from the internet. So I went on Google and gone on YouTube, and I just typed in Alien soundtrack, and there was a playlist full of the different sounds on Alien. So I went with the main title, as it was just not a super scary sound, but just a nice calming sound with a twinge of sort of eeriness, which I think added to my environment quite nicely, as I didn't want something too scary. So after downloading this, I went onto a export website, which I don't remember the exact one I went to, because there's a lot, but I found one that worked, and I was able to get the sound and bring it straight into Unreal. I wasn't able to grab any footage of me like painting and unwrapping and stuff, but after finishing the models I UV unwrapped everything, which I've said previously I struggled with some of the meshes, but I was able to get them unwrapped. They weren't the best unwraps. That's something I still need to learn more about and improve on. And I'm trying to get the gist of unwrapping and how to do a clean one, which I'm going to try and improve on during the holidays and just as I'm doing projects. Because like for example those cushions there, if I did a clean unwrap on them and whatnot, I would have been able to do a tile set on them of the hexagon texture, which even though it looks fine on my mesh now, it would have looked a lot smoother if I was able to do a tile set on it. And the door, like I said earlier, I had a few problems with the mesh, so it was hard to unwrap that with overlapping vertices. And I had to individually unwrap all of those components on my feature wall, and then I combined the wall together. But the one thing that saved my back, I think, during this project was texture sets, because I think if I didn't use texture sets, I probably would have struggled really bad with the textures in Painter, considering my unwrapping wasn't the cleanest. But overall, I am quite content with my final environment. There's definitely a lot to improve on and a lot of stuff to practice, but it was a great learning experience, and I look forward to making more environments and more meshes for environments in the future. And I think one thing that went well was I quite liked my feature wall at the end. When I first started doing it, I was very hesitant because I didn't think I would have been able to do it, because this software is very new to me in general, so I was a bit on the fence about whether to do it or not. But I didn't just want the repetitive wall in my hallway, I wanted at least one wall that was different, so that's why I ended up going for it, and I'm glad I did because it came out looking pretty nice. And as well with the smaller walls, texture in it really did make it all come together, and the lighting and all the camera work. I would have done more work on the door to make it look a bit better and less blocky, but I ran out of time during my project, so I wasn't able to. But yeah, overall I'm quite content with my environment.